This is just a quick disclaimer that I realise that my other videos are not like this. This is really more than anything just a note for me to look back on and, see if I was correct or not. And also I expect to make more things in future, so yeah, I realise this is my first video in a while. Here's my Holyrood election prediction as of early January 2026. The SNP, only a few seats short of a majority government, but still better than most people would have expected. The campaign's been effective just to overlay Volkov. Biggest issue is trying to explain to a bunch of people that independence, they can't just do that. A lot of people are just like, oh, do it, they can't do that, they need approval, and the whole thing. I think one of the other big issues is a lot of retiring long-term members, including, Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes, Transport Fiona Hislop, that kind of people, sort of two-handed, two-sided blade, where I think some people embrace, new people come in, and a lot of people will be upset because the long-time politicians are leaving, and, they might look at local candidates where they were previously voting for the candidate more than the party. So the Green Party, I think they will get stupid amount of seats, high teens, low 20s, something stupid to sort of establish them as a proper political force. I think their biggest issue is your party existing, really, is sort of just the concept. They've positioned themselves in a way that, sort of brushed away a lot of the green aesthetics, under the eco-socialist thing, which will let them ride the same way of success that the Green Party of England Wales has, where a bunch of Labour voters come over. That's been good for them. Reform UK, the Scottish branch, I think they'll get the same amount of seats the Greens do, +2, just because of the way the Holland works. They're just more favourable to it, because Greens have grown to a size where they'll probably win a few constituency seats, which means for the list seats, they'll get sort of done over. But before they rely on it, the same way the SNP did, same way Labour did for a while. And I think Reform will see that happen as well, where because they're sort of not at that scale here, they'll just be more efficient to Holland. So they'll get less seats, but not really any constituency. I don't think they'll get any constituency seats, honestly. I think the biggest issue is how much Scottish branch is sort of at level with the rest of the UK. Because Reform is, like, the whole party is against devolution, which is obviously sort of a controversial stance in the parliament you're running for. So, they're not very forthcoming with that, but I can't blame them. I think one of the biggest issues we'll see with them is if they will run as a branch or just as sort of the party, which I think Scottish Conservatives have really wanted to for a long time, just haven't. Because it's too unionist, but here I don't know, they may embrace it. And then there's Scottish Labour, or the Scottish branch of the Labour Party. I think they'll get pretty much half of what Reform does, just the same thing they do every time, where it's like, oh, Anna Sawar hates Keir Starmer. I guess Scottish Labour Party is different, and it's just nothing. He is literally subordinate to him. He is, like, there's a chain of command. He's in that chain of command. He can't even really dislike him. He can't change much, But it's because obviously Keir Starmer's incredibly unpopular, and it'll probably boost him up a little bit. But it's nothing. They just do that every time. I think the biggest issue they face is that this is the best case scenario for them, and it's not going well for them because people don't like Keir Starmer. However, an SNP government in power with Westminster should be the perfect scenario for this and the worst for the SNP, except it's sort of turned around because they've just not been very efficient at capturing voters and retaining voters, really. And most of them think Greens or SNP or your party or whatnot, or even some sort of farm. But yeah, I think just that the issue is it's just not going to work. It's sort of crazy that even for a time it was expected that they could have won within a majority, which is no. The Lib Dems, like nothing's going on there. They might get one or two more seats. I think one of the biggest issues with them is too many people remember the coalition party and with the Tory government, and too many people, they take that as the whole thing with them, and see where they're this, which is a good thing to some people, or this, and it's a bad thing to some people. Where Ed Davey has actually been making some sort of more left-wing proposals and policies, which obviously, as a party not in power, you think they'd be doing that a lot more, because you can just sort of spread rhetoric without needing to worry about, doing anything about it. Glasgow Hamilton's just been kind of sat there. The Scottish Lib Dems have not really done much. With Ed Davey's been taking more sort of active posturing to make the party out more than just, we're not the Tories, we're not Labour, because, we're sort of seeing that duopoly end, so it's sort of a less, it's not good a thing to hinge your party on anymore. And I think I think in Scotland, they sort of, unless they adopt some more meaningful policies, they're just going to be the Shetland or the Edinburgh Western Party. Those are the only seats they ever win, because it's where Oscar Hamilton lives, and the islands are weird politically. And I think that if they did take a more decisive stance, following the rest of the UK branch, earlier on, they could have captured a lot more of the voters that then went to the Greens to your party to reform, even probably made the Tory. They could have captured them better if they did take a more active stance instead of just being the Lib Dems. But they didn't. So Alba just needs to disband, in my opinion. They've got nothing going on. I couldn't even find a good photo without Alex Salmond in it. The fact that the people here, one of them is elected, not even one of them has any ounce of power. The one MSP they have that's not elected is because they left the SNP during the gender rights recognition bill. They just sort of exist now. I don't know. They're not even big enough to split the vote, which I think is really funny. They'd have the same issue that the unionist vote will have this year. With the Tories and Reform and that sort of, they don't have that issue because they're just not large enough. Which is one thing the Nationals Party vote has had that's worked very well for them, because it's pretty much the Scottish Greens, and for a while they were sort of, this irrelevant, or they party. So it's really just the SNP as the vehicle for independence, which worked out well for them, and now not so much. Just because the Greens and other people are sort of rising in the polls, it's not so much SNP or Labour Tory, Your party, I don't know what they're doing. I think they'll get one seat. You want Central Glasgow or Central Edinburgh. That's it. I'm not even incredibly concerned about that. I think they're going to split the vote with a lot of first-time voters, or a lot of less informed but sort of more culturally motivated voters who will vote on issues like Palestine, that sort of thing. I don't know. I think they've been very petulant, especially Sultana, arguing with the Greens a lot, which just seems weird, especially arguing with the Scottish Greens, and it doesn't come off well. Those accusations that it's just sort of she's been ignored, and that Corbyn's trying to take charge. It's all. I think with Corbyn specifically, he's not a bad politician, but he's had his time as well. Like, he's led one of the big two parties. We need new people in politics. And I just think the fact that they've been so unserious and arguing, and they've not even really established themselves. I don't know if they've registered with the Electoral Commission yet. They just seem like they're going to be a complete nothing burger. I don't trust them to deliver any real sort of electoral change, other than splitting the vote with the Greens, which it seems to be against their wider interests. The Tories, I think that they'll lose pretty much all of their seats, just because what are they doing at this point? I think it's impressive that Douglas Ross was even ever head of the opposition. That's mental. Again, he would regularly not show up to vote in Parliament because he's refereeing football matches, which... Can you imagine this man being First Minister, sorry. Can you imagine this man being First Minister? Like, he was the opposition against the largest party. What are we doing, guys? Come on. Anyway, I think their issue is going to be the unionist vote is going to be split, whereas it traditionally wasn't really. It was sort of really just because a lot of unionists, they would vote Tory or Labour based on who they thought the opposition would be, rather than who they would trust in more, just to have unionists in power potentially. We're not going to see that this time, because a lot of the Conservative voters now are Conservative voters because they don't like reform, which means they won't vote reform, even if they'll probably be the biggest unionist party. So that's the whole thing we have going on now, which is, I don't know, it'll be interesting. I think everyone's sort of bored of the Tories, and they've run their course, they've sort of expired. My overall predictions will be, the SNP will be around 60, Reform in the mid-20s, Labour in the mid-20s, Greens in the high teens, Conservatives in the mid-teens, Lib Dem around 8, probably less seats mostly, with the 3 constituencies, Orkney, Shetland, Edinburgh Western. About 5 independents. Most of the independents right now are just Labour Party people have been out as nonsense. But I think there'll probably be about 5 independents. Your party gets 1 seat, Alba gets none, because who cares? Which leaves Probably a pretty wide margin for a pro-Indy majority. Your party doesn't even have a stance Scottish independentship. That's predictable. It's not as if they'd be kingmakers even if they did. And Unionists, despite having a lot more parties in them, they're yeah, no. Even if we try to force a coalition here, I don't. These people would not be able to govern seriously a country. Yeah, so that's my thoughts and predictions.